So good morning. It's Friday today, my favorite day of the week, and today is my writing day. It's the day that I just look forward to so much. What I'm realizing actually is that I probably need to make this a little easier to hear. So I'm going to do this. Give me 1 second, please, while I just readjust this so that you can hear me, and all hopefully should be a little bit clearer. Okay. So today is my writing day, and I want to say I've had so many wonderful comments about these little Facebook lives that I've been doing, just talking about my process as I'm working on my new book. So I really feel emboldened to continue, in the hope that some of my reflections on how I think as I write are, in some way useful to those of you who are also writing. And maybe if you're not writing, maybe it's just interesting to see somebody who is in process. And so I want to say this. I've just come from the gym. My little ritual before I write every Friday is, and most days really, is to just get back into my body and get into this sort of the physicality of my skins, because it's from here that I write. I think so many of us think that writing takes place here. It's such a cerebral thing, which I think it most certainly in many ways is, but I also believe that so many of us kind of get into these abstractions and ideas about writing as opposed to grounding ourselves in our bodies. So I was just at the gym now, and I was just looking at particularly some of these incredibly sculpted men who spend a lot of time perfecting every little muscle in their body until the whole body becomes this incredible, very sophisticated machine. I look at those bodies and I think to myself, wow, I didn't even know that was such a thing, that muscle over there, that one that's sort of popping up, or the one that you're working on. I didn't even know there was such a thing as that muscle. And I sometimes, and then I also, one of the things that I'm always so incredibly amazed by are people who can lift their own body weight. It's always been one of my fantasies to be able to lift my own body weight. But I think for those of us who don't choose, that as our thing, and perhaps those of us who choose writing or some other creative pursuit, there is a way in which everything that we do is, in a way, an attempt to lift our own body weight. I think as we write, we are perfecting these little muscles. We are working into these different little muscles of our story, of ourselves, and that at the end, when a story has come together, it must be able to lift our own body weight. We must be able to really hold ourselves up. The whole story must be that strong. Every part of it must be that strong that we can lift our own body weight. So I really looked at that this morning and I thought, that's a really, when I know my story's done. A lot of people always say to me, how do you know when you're finished, when a book, is done? And I obviously it's never going to be perfect, or whatever we think is perfect, but there's a point at which the story holds our body weight, all our experience, all our efforts, everything. And the whole thing works together, because to hang by your own body weight, you can't just have strong forearms, you can't just have a strong core. The whole thing has got to be integrated. And so I like that idea very much, because I love the way that, the strength of the body, where all the muscles are interconnected, speaks to the writing process, where everything needs to be integrated. And so some of the comments that I've had about these little Facebook lives that I've done are that, there is so much thinking that takes place before, or planning that takes place before you write. And I think thinking is definitely part of writing, but I'm always sort of more pushing people maybe to just get to the writing, write. And when we are just focused on getting words on the page, which I think for a lot of us is just something we need to get under our belts so that we've got some form of body of work that we can then start to work with. And I always do that first. I always try to get words down on the page, before I start to overthink, because sometimes when you overthink, you can talk yourself out of doing anything. You can talk yourself out of writing it. It's not a good enough idea. I don't have enough here. So I don't like people to overthink that part. I think you should get words down. But I really believe that that part of writing, of course, is reflection. And reflection on the process and reflection on what you are writing about. It's not just about writing, like getting it out. You have to stop and reflect on what you're creating in abstract ways. You have to think about things as ideas, as universal themes, as archetypes, as mythical journeys, as resonances of other stories, of the way in which this particular story might speak into the universal experience, the themes that you are working with. Often we get into that by working thematically. But if we are working more consciously thematically, we get to kind of excavate deeper parts of our story. And I think that so many of us skip past this process of reflecting on what we're doing, because it really does require us to kind of slow down. And often in our lives, which are very, very full, and we're just trying to get to the next thing, we think that, if we spend time reflecting, we're not spending time writing. I think, though, that the writing can be improved by the reflection, and it also, at a certain point, helps you to focus on where you want to put your writing energy into, the parts of the story, like those little muscles in the body that just need a little bit more work so that the whole thing will hang together more powerfully. Now, one of the ways to get to do this is actually, as I'm doing right now, which is talking to an imaginary audience, just talking aloud about what you're doing. Just talk it aloud to yourself. You don't have to record it, but it could be useful for you to record it. It could be useful just to record it somewhere so that you can look back on it. And you will actually, I believe, be surprised at how thoughtful it is, really, when you unpack it in a way where it's almost like you're explaining it to somebody else. You're explaining, look, I'm writing this book and it's about... Now, if you've got to finish that sentence, you've got to come up with something. You've got to think about it, and you've got to be able to make it so that somebody else can get it, And the more you do this, I think it's useful to do this all the time. Maybe every time you sit down to say, right, I'm writing this book and it's about, and just let your mind take you into some place, because the book will be about many, 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 many different things. And then as if you were explaining it to somebody, and then this thing happens and that thing happens. But really, as this thing happens, what you're doing is you're hearing your own thoughts spoken out aloud. And what that does is it hooks you possibly into a little meander, into another emotional territory. It will hook you into a memory. It will hook you into something that could potentially take you down a kind of an unexpected little path. Or it will explain itself to you. You will hear yourself explain what you are doing to yourself. I just love that. It kind of blows my mind that we have such amazingly sophisticated and complex consciousness that we could actually do that to ourselves. We have the ability to soothe ourselves. We have the ability to calm ourselves down. We have the ability to reflect on things and explain things, to make meaning of things. All of those things are packed into our ability to write. It's part of what is so beautiful and sophisticated about our experience, is that we can do that. So where I'm going today with, so what I did last night before I came into the writing, it was I realized that what I want to do is I really want to explore all the facets of connection, of connection in this book. It's very much a book about connection and disconnection. Obviously, whatever your book is about, whatever the main theme is, it is also about its opposite. It's also about the shadow. So it's very important when we decide that our book is about something to then do some meta thinking about it, some bigger picture thinking about it. Even though we might have this little story, once we've got a theme, we need to then start exploring thematically what that theme could call in, what other aspects that theme could call in. So I did a kind of a little mind map, and I brainstormed all the different ideas that came to when I thought of the word connection, including, texting, email, intimacy, touch, sexuality, holding hands. I had a whole mind map of all the kinds of things, sport, the way people connect around sport, around shared memories, around living through some kind of trauma together, all the different facets of intimacy, the way in which we, connect around food, ritual, all these things. I made this big mind map around how we all connect with one another. And of course, for each one, what I now need to go and do, now that I've sort of looked at all these different facets, is I need to go and see in which ways I want to bring in all of these different areas of connection into the story. So at some point, I want to have a kind of a text conversation between the mother and the daughter, in which I am showing the ways in which people connect differently and the ways in which the younger generation connect differently, and the use of emoticons as a way of holding a whole conversation, like a whole expression, which means a whole lot of different things. So even just, the language of emoticons is a form of connection, perhaps not one that, our generation particularly, well, some of us really love the whole emoticon thing, but I'm interested in that, what emoticons stand for, and the shorthand that has become our language of connection. And when I start talking aloud and I start talking about shorthand, then it makes me think of shorthand, a different kind of shorthand that is deeply connected, which is poetry, which is kind of very rich and textured, but it is shorthand. It's kind of like very small, like a haiku is shorthand and a tweet is shorthand. So what's the difference between a haiku and a tweet? And is there a difference? And so as you start to explore these ideas, you can see the brain starts pulling in all sorts of different things that I'm like, I don't even know, how am I going to use all of this today? Where am I going to go with this? But it's just also kind of mysterious and interesting. And can you see there are like 100 little alleyways for me to scuttle down today if I want to. And I think the danger, of course, is just becoming overwhelmed with the territory that we could go into. And then this is where the kind of discipline of writing comes in, is the discernment now for me to go, look, I can't possibly deal with the entire spectrum of human connection, right? There's not possible in a little, 60,000, 70,000 word book. I've got to select the areas of connection that I want to focus on. So for example, like, I'm not a big sports fan, and sport means really nothing to me. Sorry, not nothing. I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. That's so rude. Especially to my son, who is such a big basketball fan, and to my husband, who basically lives for sport. But it's not how I connect, okay? So I'm probably not going to use sport, although I probably will mention the husband watching sport and how he is engaged in watching sport and how that's his kind of form of connection. But she feels disconnected in that conversation, because there's no way for her to enter into that territory. It's not really her form of connection, but she recognizes, he's deeply connected, and him and the son are bonding over the sport, and that's their form of connection, right? So today I am exploring the idea of women's connection and women's friendships, and I'm going in for the real, the juiciness today. I want to kind of really see if I can create a scene that completely shows and encapsulates the unrivaled, delicious sort of kind of self-accepting beauty, gloriousness, raucousness, obscenities, the kind of deliciousness of women connecting with each other in a way that is profound and enduring and beyond all the ways that we think about connection, the romance, it's got to be real, raw, vulnerable. I think it's got to involve food. I just kind of can't see how it can't involve food. It's got to involve like a ridiculous amount of laughter, possibly a little bit of, I don't know, nudity. I'm not sure. In my head, I'm trying to imagine all the times and remember all the times in which I have felt so deeply connected to a girlfriend, or to my sisters, or to my girlfriends, where it's just, I have felt a kind of deep acceptance, deeply seen, deeply loved, deeply known, in a way where I'm not trying anymore. I'm not posturing. I don't have to play a role, shall I say. I think, hope it's not a serious tea, but anyway. So today, that's really where I want to go with this scene. I want to, in the story, I'm at this point where two mothers and daughters, they now meet up in Italy, and the one daughter is she's just being a complete pain in the ass. She's just she's legitimately in a very sort of emotionally fraught place. The mother's trying to connect with her, just doing everything wrong. Whatever she tries, it just blows up in her face, and it's just too hard. She's just trying too hard, and nothing is working. Nothing's working. And the friend says to her, you know what, just stop trying, just stop trying. There's nothing really that you can do right now. You've got to let her go through this herself. And the mother's kind of she's not giving up. She's still trying, and she keeps looking for signs of life in the daughter. Oh, maybe she's getting better. Maybe. And then the two daughters just go off. They just disappear. They leave the two mothers on their own. And now she is completely at a loss. Now, of course, when you're writing, what you have to do, of course, is you have to make your main character's worst fears come true. Like the worst thing, the biggest fear. So you always must start with letting us know what she wants or what she's afraid of, and then it's got to happen to her. That's the point of a character arc. So the daughter's gone. She doesn't know where she is. She can't contact her, and they're in a foreign country. And so she's got two options. She can panic, and she can become hysterical, and she can freak out and contact the police and whatever else it is, or she can just say, okay, well, she's gone off, and they're together, and trust my child to sort of figure it out on her own. And it's in that space that I've got to try and get her, like I'm moving her out of the anxiety and into a kind of remember who you were before you were a mother. Remember who you were before you were completely consumed by trying to make everything right for everybody else, trying to save everybody else. Remember who you were. So of course now she's got to go back into a memory of a time before she was a mother, and the connections she had as a young woman, of which there were sort of some quite really delicious, yummy encounters and friendships that she had. But of course, friendships post-children, I think, are completely different. Friendships that you have when you are 19 with your girlfriends are just a very different texture. They're a different kind of friendship to the ones that you have when you are in your 50s or 60s, right? So, but I really want her to kind of bring herself back into her body in the way that she was when she was 19. And it's very different being in a 50-year-old body than it is being in a 19-year-old body. So I want to play around there today. That's where I want to play with. I want to play with her in her body, with her friend, kind of moving into a kind of remembrance, a full-throttled remembrance of what it was like to be, who she was and who she is. I mean, it's not who she was, it's who she is. It's just that she has chosen to forget, and she's chosen to, kind of like sacrifice everything for this daughter who literally has to walk her own path. And at some point she has got to understand that the only thing that she can do is to really just let her daughter go and allow her to experience whatever she's going through, but reminding her, I'm here if you need me, but I can't save you. You've got to decide that you are going to save yourself. But again, there is just that really lovely sort of that place of how you write that and how you get into that, how you show that in the writing, right? Without it becoming a very didactic thing that mothers should allow their children to figure things out for themselves. It's nothing like that. It's got to be shown, and it's got to be shown in the moments and in the scenes that are crafted carefully to reveal this emotional territory. So anyway, that's where I am today with it, and I do hope that if you are working on something, that you'll find something that jiggles you a little bit here and makes you go off and think about your own story in a way that is exciting and exhilarating. And I will see you again next Friday.